Africa, you have the floor, and you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I will not start from the beginning, but I think it's critical for me to provide some statistics which are very important in the decision-making in relation to this proposal. Analysis of trade records in the CITES trade database show that most of the legal trade in hippo originates from Southern Africa. That is 87% of hunting trophies, 97% of live animals, and 98% of hippo tusks. In this light, it's difficult, therefore, to understand how ending legal trade, which is negligible in the rest of Africa and not an identified threat, will bring about the recovery of declining hippo populations in the region. We have done comprehensive work as a country, and we believe that hippo is well managed. It's a species of least concern, and our scientific authority recently completed a comprehensive NDF for the species, and the assessment concludes that international trade poses a low risk to hippo in South Africa, and the national population is stable, and apart from some poaching in only one nature reserve, there is no evidence of overuse or even illegal trade anywhere in South Africa. South Africa's hippo population exceeds 11,000 individuals, and offtakes are sustainable. And the details of this scientific assessment can be found in Information Document 83. In light of this positive NDF, and the Southern African regional successes of sustainable use of hippo products and derivatives contributing to conservation, South Africa cannot support a zero export quota when trade is not detrimental to the survival of the species in the wild. Instead, South Africa encourages CITES parties to support those countries that experience national declines in hippos. Interventions should therefore focus on addressing the primary threats of habitat loss and degradation, hippo-human conflict, and climate change through developing and implementing appropriate national management plans. And we stand ready as a country, and I'm sure as a sub-region, to support the countries who are really struggling in terms of their hippo numbers. We submit, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I now give the floor to Zambia, followed by Morocco.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Zambia is a major range state of the hippo and does not support Proposal 1 submitted by Benin and other proponents, as amended to maintain hippopotamus amphibius in Appendix II with the following annotation: a zero export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes. Why is it that we do not support this amendment? It's simply because of the following reasons. We note that the scope of the proposal is similar to the previous Appendix I submission, considering that an Appendix II listing with a zero quota does not differ with an Appendix I listing. Secondly, the common hippo does not have a restricted range, nor does it have a small population. Estimates of population trends vary across African range states, with most hippo populations stable or increasing in others allegedly decreasing. We maintain that the two IUCN Red List assessments that have been done on the species are surrounded by a high level of uncertainty, as highlighted in our information document 51 available on the CITES website, and that specialized surveys of hippos are extremely rare, with the majority of surveys across the continent severely underestimating hippo numbers. Zambia has on record the longest monitoring program of hippos in Africa, and perhaps one of the longest in the world. We have, over a long period of time, undertaken regular hippo ground counts along the Luangwa River in eastern Zambia. This methodology is one of the best to accurately estimate hippo populations and is now integrated by the use of drones, which are giving very positive results and enhancing the accuracy of the methodology. Zambia has a hippo population of more than 45,000 as highlighted by independent reviewers. Further to this, Chair, distinguished delegates, trade is substantially decreasing and is not a cause of decline of the species. There is urgent need to recognize and accept the different circumstances of the species and refrain from submitting proposals that have little or no scientific basis. The proposal by Benin and other countries is not based on science and therefore falls short of the criteria by CITES, which is to base decisions on science, considering that the population status of hippo is not declining and neither is it affected by trade. Therefore, Zambia is strongly opposed to this proposal and is calling upon the international community to assist in improving the quantity and quality of hippo surveys based on proper methodologies. We therefore recommend the following. 1A, increase and improve surveys of the hippo population on the continent because of the current lack of reliable estimates with proper methodologies, more so in countries where the population is visibly declining. B, management planning and aimed at achieving sound management plans of the species across the continent. Provide funding for the 2 points outlined above. And as outlined by Eswatini and Tanzania split a listing to apply to parties where domestic measures to protect hippo have clearly failed. I submit, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Zambia. I now give the floor to Morocco.
Merci. Thank you, Chair. I am going to be very brief to try and save us some time. Morocco would like to support the amendment proposal for the listing of hippopotamus to Appendix II in order to include a zero exportation quota for wild hippopotamus to be traded for commercial purposes. As it's been said, hippopotamus is threatened in its survival, including poaching and the meat and ivory trade. In order to fight against this illegal and damaging trade, we agree to include the proposal in order to modify the listing of hippopotamus in Appendix II in order to include a zero quota. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Okay, one moment.
Thank you, Chair.
Interpretation problem. Spanish. English. Okay.
Can you hear the English booth? This is the English booth.
Right.
1, 2, 3. Can we hear the English booth? 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Back a little bit and just give us the latter part of your intervention again. You have the floor to Morocco.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Chair. I am going to be brief in order to
Mozambique is a state hippopotamus. would like to say that we are in favor of the proposal presented because hippopotamus is also part of livelihoods of the local units and is a constituent part of the government economic source. Mozambique has done a specialized survey, and the numbers that we have show that we have a stable population, even growing in growing numbers. So we would like to reiterate that we are opposing the document that was proposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mozambique. I give the floor to Burkina Faso, followed by Ghana.
Merci. Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. The hippopotamus population in Burkina Faso is between 1,500 and 2,000 individuals. However, we are seriously concerned about the survival of the species, and we join Benin as co-proponents and call on all CITES parties to support this proposal.
Okay, one moment. We seem to have interpretation.
This is the English booth. Can anyone hear it? People can hear the English booth. Thank you for raising your hands.
A number of people are not hearing English, is that correct? All right.
Would people please hold their hands up if they can hear English? So people can hear the English booth.
Testing mic number 2. Can you hear the English booth, please? Can you also raise your hands? Thank you very much.
So it seems that we're back in business. So Burkina Faso, you can resume your intervention.
Donc, je disais que
I was saying that Burkina Faso join Benin as co-proponents in encouraging all parties at CITES to support the proposal, despite its existing listing. The continental population of the common hippopotamus has reduced by around 30%. And as amphibious mammals, hippopotamus are creatures that need access to fresh water, which is threatened by agricultural development, but also more and more by climate change. Droughts, which are ever more frequent, bring about massive mortality. And to the extent that these threats are going to continue to worsen, poaching and hippo ivory trafficking will also make matters worse. We must also recall that in South Africa, they were saying that 87% of hunted hippos for trophies came from South Africa, but that is not relevant because this proposal is only applied for commercial purposes. That's why we call for the support of the amendment.
We've got
The English cannot be heard.
the interpretation is not coming through for some reason.
The English booth is working. No one can hear us?
We'll just have to wait a little bit, see if we can resolve this problem.
channel. Testing the English channel. Testing the English channel. Testing English.
Yeah. So interpreters, maybe could you give us a test message or something?
English booth test. Can you hear microphone number 1? Can you give me a thumbs up? Thank you very much. Microphone 2, can you let us know if you can hear us? Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. We seem to given the okay to 6, you'd be delighted to know. So, but nevertheless, I urge you to be as brief and succinct as you can be. So, Burkina Faso, you have the floor.
Ok, Monsieur le Président.
Okay, Chair. I am sorry about these technical issues. Thank you. I would like to recall the delegate from South Africa who was saying that 80% of all hippos hunted were a trophy hunted and came from my area. That is not quite true. I would also like to recall that with this annotation we would be prohibiting trade for commercial purposes, but it would not prohibit the delivering of an export certificate. Trade for other purposes other than commercial would not be affected with this annotation. Therefore, it is imperative to adopt this proposal in order to include this annotation, and this so that traffickers cannot launder the hippo products via legal trade. Thank you very much, Chair. And we hope, interpreters hope, that we have been heard clearly as well this time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Burkina Faso, I'll give the floor to Ghana, followed by Nigeria.
Can you brief? Thank you, Chair. I think Ghana will keep it brief. Ghana is also a range state to the species, and then we support the proposal put forward on the common hippopotamus by Benin and the others. And we know the importance of their biology, and we also know how trade can affect the illegal trade, can affect conservation of the species. So we fully support the proposal put forward by Benin and others. Thank you.
Thank you. Ghana, I give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Guinea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nigeria is a range state for hippo, and the population has dwindled, has drastically fallen. So Nigeria is greatly troubled that hippos are facing the same threat as African elephants poaching and the trafficking in ivory. So this destructive trade threatens not only for the security of African continent, but indeed some of its iconic mega fauna. So this problem must be met with coordinated action. Therefore, Nigeria joins the proponents in urging CITES parties to adopt the proposal to amend the Appendix II listing for hippo to include the zero export quota for wild source hippo specimens traded for commercial purposes. This will deprive traffickers of an avenue they are using to get ivory from poached hippos into the legal market. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. So I give the floor to Guinea, followed by Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. It's the first time that Guinea takes the floor, and I'd like to congratulate the Chair on his election, and I'd like to thank the government of Panama for their hospitality and the good organization of the COP. In accordance with Article 4 of CITES, trade in species listed in Appendix II, such as a hippopotamus, should be regulated to maintain this species throughout its range in a balance with its role in the ecosystems it is present in. And it needs to be kept above the level that it could be, where it could become eligible to listing in Appendix I. However, that's not what is happening with the common hippopotamus. Since the species was listed in 1994, it has continued to decline. Today, most national populations meet the conditions necessary to be listed in Appendix I. In Guinea, we, as co-proponents of this proposal, have just 500 hippos left, and our population is declining. The legal trade in hippo ivory is a threat to the survival of our hippopotamuses. So we call on parties to support our proposal to bring an end to the illegal to the legal trade and prevent the trafficking of wild animals and to prevent the laundering of these products. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea. I give the floor to Burundi, followed by Mali.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Burundi is a range state of the hippopotamus, and we support the proposal. Hippo populations are dramatically reduced because of the threats that exist in their ages. It's also their ranges. They are also subject to poaching, and we'd like to have a capacity building to help us with conducting censuses of our populations. Thank you.
Thank you, Burundi. I give the floor to Mali, followed by Namibia.
Merci, Monsieur le.
Thank you, Chair. Mali, as a range state for hippo and co-proponent of this proposal. We, of course, support the proposal, and we call on all parties to support it, because it's a matter of preserving and conserving the life of a species which, at a time when we are fighting to close ivory markets, we must ensure that this is not added to elephant ivory.
Thank you, Molly. So I give the floor to Namibia now, followed by Botswana. Namibia, you've kind of disappeared. Oh.
Thank you, Chairperson, for giving Namibia the floor. Namibia is one of the range states for hippopotamus. We have scrutinized the proposal under discussion. Like the Democratic Republic of Congo, it's Namibia's view that Proposal 1 is not based on science. It's clear that the main threat to hippopotamus is not international trade, but loss of habitat in specific range states, which will not be resolved by any of the CITES listings. That main threat can only be resolved by putting national and regional management regimes in place, as suggested by Zimbabwe. Chairperson, the amendments being proposed are actually just equivalent to Appendix I listing, and Namibia does not support that either. We agree with Tanzania that maybe the proponent should consider only subjecting the populations outside Southern Africa to a zero export quota for commercial trade in wild specimens. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Namibia. So I now give the floor to Botswana, followed by Guinea-Bissau.
Chair, thank you for the floor. We acknowledge the proposal submitted by Benin and co-proponents. Botswana is one of the range states, and we are not in support of the proposal. We believe the proposal does not meet scientific rigor on which CITES decisions need to be made. The data in the proposal is highly misleading. For example, the species is capable of up to 18% growth per year, unlike what is reported in the proposal. Secondly, the estimates of the IUCN cited in the proposal are outdated, and recent estimates suggest at least a 30% increase in populations across the continent. Thirdly, trade is actually decreasing according to a Traffic 2021 report that is not quoted in the proposal. Mr. Chair, the hippo does not have a restricted range, nor does it have a small population. The population in Botswana is stable and stands at 15,000, which is 5 times more than what is indicated in the proposal. Hippo is fully protected in Botswana. Furthermore, Botswana, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe have published InfoDoc 51, where we summarize the inadequacies in the scientific rigor of the proposal. So, Chairman, the data provided by the proponents to justify the zero quota is not valid because it does not reflect the true reflection of the status of hippo within the range states. In view of this, Botswana does not support the proposed decision to establish zero quota. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Botswana. I give the floor now to Guinea-Bissau, followed by Liberia.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Guinea-Bissau which has parts that are island and parts that are continental. We support this proposal because the hippo is a tourist attraction in the archipelago. The majority of our population of around 100 individuals is in the national park of the Oranga Islands, which is a marshland which is under protected marine area, which is UNESCO listed as an important area for protection. So we support this proposal, and we call on all parties to join us in supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Guinea-Bissau. I give now the floor to Liberia, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Chair. Let me join to align myself with Benin and other countries that have joined together to compile this proposal. And we stand prepared to support the proposal. And there is no animals according to creation that was regarded as troubled animals or in some kind of troubling animals to human beings. It is human being behavior that has caused a lot of wildlife to become more troubling to them. If the habitat is not being disturbed by human beings or being encroached by human beings, no wildlife will get out of the wild to go and attack human beings. So with this proposal, we wholeheartedly support this proposal because it will help us to manage our remaining population of the wildlife of this particular hippo within the wild, because we believe that this has a biological value as well as aesthetic value and socio-economic value to the survival of humanity. So with this, we support the proposal wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. I now give the floor to the European Union, followed by Cameroon.
Thank you, Chair. I speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. We acknowledge and share the concerns expressed by the proponents with regard to conservation challenges that hippopotamus faces in several range states. However, the situation of the hippopotamus population is different in different range states. There have been declines in the population in some range states, but in others the population is stable or increasing. Moreover, the international trade is not considered a significant threat to the species, and this trade has remained stable or declined over the last 10 years. And the main exporters of hippopotamus specimens are from Eastern and Southern Africa, where many national populations appear to be stable or increasing in numbers. Chair, this is what data and science tell us. We have actually heard a number of range states opposing this proposal. We therefore oppose imposing a mandatory zero export quota for commercial purposes for those range states in which the populations are stable or growing, unless these range states agree. We therefore suggest to establish zero quotas for the proponent countries and for those other range states who consider that such establishment of a zero quota would be supportive of conservation efforts. At the same time, we strongly encourage all range states to set sustainable quotas based on recent population data. We also consider that it would be useful to improve reporting on trade, in particular with regard to the number of harvested individuals. We propose that the COP adopts a set of decisions in that regard. We would be happy to work with range states in preparing such decisions, and we have available some language that could be used as a starting point. We would be happy to provide it to you, Chair, to the room. We have heard that other parties have also proposals on decisions, so we would be ready to discuss in a small drafting group if needed. Thank you very much, Chair.
So thank you, European Union. So we heard your suggestions. Clearly you're suggesting that zero quota should just be for the proponent countries and maybe some others. But I don't think that's specific enough to be a formal amendment, unless you intended it as such. And you also suggested that you'd be happy to work with countries on draft decisions, and as you say, other parties have alluded to that as well. So I'll come back to that at the end. But just to clarify, are you proposing, you have the floor, EU?
Yes, thank you very much. I'm sorry for not being clear. So what we are proposing is a set of decisions that set zero quotas for those proponent countries on those who believe this is needed, and decisions also on the issue of reporting on trade. So the decisions would cover these issues.
So we understand now exactly your point, European Union, and we'll come back to that when I sum up later. I'll give the floor now to Cameroon, followed by Costa Rica, then Fiji.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor. As you have said, we haven't got much time, so Cameroon will be very brief. Cameroon is not favorable to these proposal with amendment. Indeed, the data that has allowed to make this proposal does not seem to us right. These data have expired or are not updated. For example, the evaluation or analysis of the hippo population, it says that in Cameroon the population had a huge decline. But when we analyzed the data, we realized that this information, there was a huge amount of individuals that haven't been taken into account. In several habitats hadn't been taken into account in the northern parts of the country with regards to the Cameroon population. In terms of the quantities, we have a quote. The quota was 10, and Cameroon also has a national plan for the management of hippopotamus, which allows to have a sustainable management of the hippopotamus population, and therefore we believe that something has to be done in this regard, and we would like to encourage countries to update or put in place national plans for management of hippopotamus. This is our point of view, Chair, on this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. Give the floor to Costa Rica, then Fiji.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chair. Costa Rica would like to take the floor on behalf of Guatemala, Uruguay, Peru, Belize, Panama, Paraguay, Chile, Dominican Republic, Honduras, Argentina, and El Salvador. We would like to congratulate.
Queremos felicitar a los.
We would like to congratulate the proponents of the proposal and to give our support for the amendment to include hippopotamus in Appendix II with a zero export quota for all wild specimens In the proposal, we see clearly that the wild hippopotamus populations are in huge decline and they're facing huge threats. So we believe that adopting this proposal would help to curb one of the threats in regards to the ivory trade, which is putting in danger the survival of the species. And for this reason, we would like to support, as these countries would like to support this proposal, and we would like to invite all parties to support the proposal as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Costa Rica, I give the floor to Fiji, and I have Senegal on my list. I haven't forgotten about you, but so Fiji, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Fiji thanks the co-proponents of this proposal and would like to join in support of this proposal. Fiji notes from the amended proposal that there is a need to amend Appendix II listing for the hippopotamus to include a zero export quota for wild-sourced hippo specimens that are being traded for commercial purposes in order to tackle this trade and prevent the laundering of illegal hippo ivory into the legal trade. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fiji. My intention was to come back to the proponents at the end of the debate to ask for their reflections, and I'll maybe go to Senegal in a short while. They can give their perspective. But we have heard a few suggestions, including for the idea of a working group here to look at a set of decisions. So I would ask the proponents to consider that and think about whether they are willing to go along with that to see if a way forward can be found. But in the meantime, sorry, I see Senegal, yes? I know you're on the screen. I was going to come back to you right at the end to give you a chance to give some reflections. Do you need to speak now immediately, or? Okay, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for giving us the floor. I would like, before we go any further, with regards to the proposal made by the EU, the co-proponent countries, we oppose to the creation of a working group, and we also oppose to a slighted proposal. What we are submitting for approval is the proposal that we have submitted with that zero amendment. And I would also like to say that all parties that have taken the floor have all spoken about the threats to the hippopotamus, whether it's drought, loss of habitat, illnesses, climate change, all have an impact on the hippo population to reduce the survival and reproduction of the species. To that, we must add the trade in ivory. Most of the range states have become risky areas that increase the risk of poaching and illegal trade. And this is the reason why, Chair, a split listing, that means granting different levels of protection to different populations of the species, must be avoided due to the problems of implementation that this creates. Not only this would not allow us to solve the illegal trade issue, which is the reason that this proposal was made and what we want to avoid. Chair, the need to manage the hippo populations in the countries where those populations are on the increase does not give us the right to choose that way, but rather only encourages illegal trade, which is why, Chair, I would like to invite all parties to vote in favor of this proposal with the amendment for zero quotas in order to ensure the sustainable survival of hippos. And I think today we can say that hippos have disappeared from several countries, and we don't want this to happen again. The fact that we have increasing populations in some countries doesn't give us the right to continue trading illegally with hippo species and specimens. I think that the elephant is there. We had made a proposal. What did we do? At the end of the day, we decided to ban trade because we saw that semi-proposal hadn't led us anywhere. So we don't want to see the same thing with hippos. We want one proposal only, and we would like to say that we have discussed amongst us. We know that a working group is not going to help, so we want to request that this proposal be approved as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. So your response is fairly clear there that you don't think there's scope for compromise on a set of decisions, and that therefore you want to vote on the proposal as it stands. I've also got requests from the floor from Gabon and Niger, and perhaps they were going to provide their response as well. But European Union, do you want to come back on the comments from Senegal? Give you the floor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. If the proposal for a set of decisions is not supported by the proponents, we then propose to we make a proposal for an amendment of the listing proposal. To set a zero export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes for the populations of the list of countries that are proponent. This way, we ensure that the concerns as regards the conservation of the hippopotamus in these range states are taken into account. And if this proposal doesn't gather consensus by the parties, we ask for it to be voted. Please, thank you.
Thank you, EU. You've made and the list of parties is now starting to grow, but you made a formal amendment proposal, and so we will address it under Rule 25.5. I'll give the floor to some of the other co-proponents for their responses. I know other parties are asking for the floor. I'll go first to Gabon and Niger, and I think, really, if you could be very brief, because I think we're at a situation where there is one amendment proposal. There doesn't seem to be scope for compromise. We need to look at this amendment proposal under Rule 25.5, and the compromise of having a working group and decisions doesn't seem to be acceptable. But so Gabon and Niger as co-proponents, and I see others all coming in. I don't want to prolong this debate now in particular, because it seems to me there's only one way to resolve this issue on the floor. But Gabon, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Indeed, we have spent quite a long time on this issue, and it's time to reach a conclusion. I would like to thank you for the summary you've made on the fact that we haven't got a consensus, and to dwell on something that Senegal had mentioned. They made a very eloquent intervention, so I haven't got much more to add. If not to say that we would reject the creation of a working group as much as we reject the amendment proposal made by the EU. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabon. I'll give the floor to Niger.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Niger, as co-proponent of this proposal, we have exchanged for many months over this issue amongst us. And this species is in a very critical situation. And between Niger and Burkina Faso, we have had support by the European Union through several projects, especially for some species like hippos. Hippos are in a very grave situation, as my colleague from Senegal has reminded us. There are the threats, conflicts, degradation of the habitat loss, and more crucial even is the insecurity situation that is really threatening these species. All this to say that honestly, Niger supports this proposal as set out by Senegal. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's very clear to me that enough of the proponents do not wish to look for a different way forward and want the proposal put to a vote. But of course, we would first have to vote on the amendment proposed by the European Union. So on my list at the moment, and I don't really want any more parties, I've got South Africa, Israel, Benin, Eswatini, Central African Republic, United Republic of Tanzania, Zambia now, Gambia. No more requests for the floor. It seems to me we're just going around in circles. You know, if some of the parties were coming in to support the suggestion from the EU, well, you'll get a chance in a moment to vote on that issue, because that is the only way I see of resolving that. So if that was all you needed to say, if you could please unpress your buttons, because I think a vote is really the only way to, or a series of votes, in fact, is the only way to resolve this. And I see also that observers are requesting the floor. I was hoping to give observers some time, but given it's now 4:45 and we've made, because of disruptions, very little progress this afternoon, I would beg your indulgence. I don't think interventions now are going to change the debate or add substance to it. It seems to me there are, two very different views on the way forward. So please, observers, I'm not giving the floor to you on this particular proposal. So thank you for your indulgence. Israel and Eswatini, you have retained your microphone buttons. If you would say, if you have a specific point to make, would you do it, but very briefly, please?
Thank you, Chair. We applaud the proponents of this document. Their argument is compelling, and we are convinced to support it. We are alarmed by the suggestion of a split-listed quota. This will only lead us into the regulatory swamp that we now experience with split-listed elephants.
Okay, Israel, it seems to me we're kind of rehearsing arguments here, and you came in, right at the end. I think the only way to resolve it is through a vote, and I would really like to move to that. I think it's very clear what your view is. You're not in favor of a split listing, or I guess the amendment proposed by the EU.
I think you're denying the reason that we want to express for having this opinion, and that's what debate is all about.
Yes, it is, but we've had a long debate. If you can express your reasons, but extremely succinctly, please, so we can move on.
Succinctly, Mr. Chairman, split listing proposal is impractical because continued legal trade provides a conduit into which poached ivory, whether for elephants or hippopotamuses, can be laundered. That is the crux of the issue, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, and I understand your rationale. So, the way I suggest we go forward is that we now vote under Rule 25.5 on the amendment to the annotation as proposed by the European Union, which would amend the current proposal, which reads a zero export quota for wild specimens traded for commercial purposes for the populations of, and then we would list the proponent countries. So Benin, Burkina Faso, Central African Republic, Gabon, Guinea, Liberia, Mali, Niger, Senegal, and Togo. So that is the EU amendment as I've captured it. It's clear that there's no consensus on the EU position, so I'm going to move now to a vote. The vote now is on whether you are in support of this amendment or not. And if the vote is a positive one and meets a 2/3 majority, then the original proposal shall supersede the original proposal. We would then have to vote on an amended proposal. If the EU amendment is not accepted, then I would move on and make a vote on the original proposal as submitted by the 10 proponent countries. So I hope everyone is clear on that. So when we come to the vote, if you vote yes, you're voting in favor of the EU amendment. If you vote no, you're voting against it. So with that, I will now move to begin the voting procedure. So this is a vote for agenda item 1, proposal number 1, I beg your pardon. This is a normal vote. It is for the annotation, the amendment to the annotation proposed by the European Union. It is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. As this is a proposal for the amendment of the appendices, it will require a 2/3 majority. So I'm just going to check with the technicians that everything is in order.
We're ready, Chairman.
Thank you. So parties, you now have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Thank you, technicians. If you could display the results on the main screen, please. The proposed amendment by the European Union didn't meet the 2/3 majority, so it is not accepted. And I think parties now had a chance to maybe look at the numbers. If we could display the results of individual party votes on the screen, please. Thank you. I think we've had a full cycle of votes, so we can remove that from the screen now. As the EU suggested annotation was not accepted, we now move on to vote on the proposal as originally submitted by excuse me, the 10 proponent countries. So we now move to vote on proposal number 1. And of course, if you vote yes, you are voting in favor of the proposal as it originally stood, and if you vote no, you're voting against it. So, just to begin the voting procedure, we've got everybody at their seats, I think. So this is a vote on proposal number 1. It's a normal vote. And the vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. And this is a proposal for the amendment of the appendices, so it requires a 2/3 majority. And I'm just going to check with the technicians that everything is in order.
We're ready, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. So parties, you have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. So the technicians could display the result on the screen, please. This proposal number 1 did not meet the 2/3 majority, so it is not adopted by this committee as a recommendation to plenary. So thank you all for your time and comments on that proposal. We will now move on. If you just give me a moment. I always forget. And I always forget to ask the technicians to show the individual party votes. So they're now in front of you. Thank you. So thank you, colleagues. So as the working program indicates, the intention was to do hippos and the 2 African elephant proposals this afternoon. So the next item on our agenda then is proposal number 4, which relates to the amending annotation 2 pertaining to the populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe of the African elephant. Zimbabwe is the proponent, so I invite Zimbabwe to introduce their proposal.
Chair, thank you, Chair. Chair, Zimbabwe is honored to introduce CoP19 Proposal 4, titled Amendment to Annotation 2 pertaining to the elephant populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. The populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe of Loxodonta africana are included in Appendix II with an annotation. This proposal, level 6, to largely amend annotation 2 in relation to the populations of the 4 countries by deleting elements of the annotation that are obsolete. Precisely, it is the deletion of paragraphs G14, 5 and 7, and paragraph H dealing with the once-off ivory cell, which was done years back, and deleting the words in and for non-commercial purposes 4 in relation to the trade in leather goods for Zimbabwe as captured in paragraph E. The 4 countries have largely, the 4 countries have relatively large elephant populations, which are either increasing or have mild and non-significant declines. The population of these 4 countries is around 257,000 elephants, or 61.6% of all remaining elephants in Africa. The habitat and available range is large, and the 4 countries have put in place collaborative and cooperative arrangements in law enforcement through the implementation of the SADC law enforcement anti-poaching strategy. Africa has several geographically differentiated elephant populations with different growth trends and trajectories. Hence, one-size-fits-all policies does not apply. The unique situation of elephant populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe must be appreciated. From 2017 to 2021, there is strong evidence of a downward trend in elephant mortality due to poaching. Ivory collected from natural elephant mortalities from these elephants Ivory collected from natural elephant mortalities and from those elephants managed as part of human-elephant conflicts is marked for traceability and is secured. Denying countries with such ivory stockpiles an opportunity to commercially dispose it in an effort to raise revenue for conservation activities like anti-poaching and supporting community-based initiatives or alternative livelihood options is surely unfair for people living with wildlife. Therefore, this proposal is motivated by the urgent and justified need to raise revenue to conserve the world's biodiversity that is in Zimbabwe and the other proponent countries. Zimbabwe is willing to work on further precautionary measures as guided by the COP and the CITES Secretariat. Therefore, Zimbabwe requests the Conference of Parties to adopt the amendment to the annotation. I submit, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. And with that, I open the floor for parties. So I begin by giving the floor to Benin, followed by the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor so we can give our opinion on this issue. Chair, Benin would like to firmly oppose this proposal that has been presented because it will come back to opening once more international trade in ivory. The proposals to modify the annexes, the appendices, is not suitable. When the conservation of a species is not certain, we must act in the best interest of the species in question. Elephants are not doing well. Quite the contrary. According to the IUCN's latest evaluation, they are at risk of extinction. And we have also seen the one-off sales have stimulated demand and increased poaching, which means it threatens all of the species throughout Africa. So when we look at the initiatives for the protection, the Elephant Protection Initiative, for instance, we can see that this is not going to help. This proposal risks putting us back into that same catastrophic situation that we were in before. So I call on countries to join Benin in opposing this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Benin. I now give the floor to Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by Liberia.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I'm speaking from the opposite point of view of what my colleague from Benin has said. We consider that it's not normal that countries who have made efforts for the conservation of elephants, such as Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, Zimbabwe, should be punished. They should not be punished. That's not the role of CITES. What we do is want to reduce trade to ensure it is sustainable, legal, and traceable. So I fully support the proposal made by Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of the Congo. I give the floor now to Liberia, followed by Burkina Faso.
Thank you, Chair. Liberia feels so set aback when looking at the revisitation of the annex, and we feel that revisiting the annex will open a way for another trade as promoting illegal trade, especially for ivory, and also causing more problem in the decline of the remaining elephant population. So Liberia do not stand to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. I now give the floor to Burkina Faso, followed by Panama.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Burkina Faso strongly opposes this proposal, which would be reopening international trade in ivory. The proposal, which aims to amend the appendices, should apply precautionary principles as in ResConf 9.24. When the impacts of trade on the conservation of a species are uncertain, parties must take measures that are in the best interest of the species in question. And the populations of elephant are not doing better, quite the contrary. According to the latest IUCN Red List evaluation, their status has worsened. Savanna elephants are in danger of extinction, and forest elephants are in critical danger. So, Burkina Faso opposes this proposal completely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Burkina Faso. I give the floor now to Panama, followed by Kenya.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. We are concerned by the step backwards that's being proposed. Elephant populations were threatened, and population science shows that. We are proposing something that's against the science. This is a market that was difficult to close and to regulate. And the proposal doesn't have a means of being implemented because we cannot have ivory traceability, the source, and whether it came from the wild or elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Panama. I now give the floor to Kenya, followed by Eswatini.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, we appreciate the elephant conservation efforts by the proponent of this proposal, and that their population is growing. Chairman, Kenya is a range state and also have a growing elephant population. Since the international ban in 1989 in ivory trade in 1989, we have seen Kenyan's population grow from 16,000 in 1989 to the current population, 36,280. Mr. Chairman, this submission was also done at CoP19, and the Conference of Parties rejected this proposal. Repealing the annotation means the Southern African countries will revert to full Appendix II. The current red listing by IUCN has categorized African savanna elephants as endangered and the forest elephants as critically endangered. We have done 2 experiments on allowing ivory sales, and this one of sale has been linked to spikes in poaching, according to Mike report in 2021, and subsequently impact on illegal trade of elephant ivory as they are closely linked. This proposal, therefore, if this COPS approves it, it will undermine the current trend to close global ivory market, with the largest market closed at COP18, the China market. And it will also lead to ivory laundering and spike in elephant poaching. We therefore strongly oppose the suggested amendments to the annotations as they currently are, and they request the Conference of Parties to oppose this proposal.
Thank you, Kenya. I now give the floor to Eswatini, followed by Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. Unsurprisingly, I would like to state that moratoriums have proven to be problematic and have not served to benefit the broader conservation of species in many instances when they are implemented, and more especially with animals that have high impacts with communities and the people that are expected to live alongside them. Eswatini is a range state, albeit a small one, and we are confident that the proponent countries have demonstrated over the years that they are committed and capable to implement the required controls to ensure that this proposed trade will be properly regulated. Many of the same issues expressed in the hippo proposal, number 1, are also relevant here, with similar geographical divides, as well as benefits to conservation and communities. And for the sake of time, I'll not go into those. But I would also just close by saying that Eswatini supports this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Eswatini. I give the floor to Zambia, followed by the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving Zambia the floor. We would like to register our support for the proposal by Zimbabwe. And we would also beg to ask the question, at what point will good conservation be rewarded? We have reaped rewards, but all we see are problems dealing with human-wildlife conflict. And I think it's appropriate that these restrictions be lifted so that these countries that have put in tremendous effort to conserve the elephants realize the benefits of good conservation. And at the same time, the countries that put up proposals to restrict trade or listing proposals should also demonstrate that those listings that they advance should also demonstrate that there's successes, and all we see at every conference of parties is more listings. I submit, Chair.
Thank you, Zambia. I now call upon the European Union, followed by Senegal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The EU and its member states recognize and applaud the successful work done by those 4 range states concerned by this proposal in conserving this iconic species. And we encourage all African elephant range states to continue their efforts in combating the poaching of elephants and illegal ivory trade. Still, we oppose any change to the current CITES regime which would result in a resumption of the international trade in elephant ivory. We are of the view that this would negate all the work done by parties to close down markets that may contribute to illegal trade and may lead to a new spike in poaching and illegal trade in ivory. Such a move would undermine all efforts done to reduce the demand for ivory. If, however, a revised proposal would be submitted that would only modify the annotation to make it more readable and up-to-date, without any legal effects on the current trade rules, we can reconsider our position. And we hope that this is something that will be considered in the dialogue meeting that was decided upon this morning in Committee 2. But we cannot support the current proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union. I give the floor to Senegal, followed by China.
Thank you very much, Chair. Senegal also opposes this proposal, which risks to open up a process that will harm all elephant populations in Africa. At CoP18 in Geneva, Zimbabwe was identified as a country of concern when it came to the implementation of the convention. And I refer to the CITES report and IUCN Traffic's report on that was submitted at COP18. We must reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I now give the floor to China, followed by the Central African Republic.
Thank you, Chair. China appreciates the efforts of the relevant range states, Zimbabwe, Botswana, South Africa, and Namibia, for elephants conservation and management. We support this proposal to make the annotation up to date. Thank you.
Thank you, China. I give the floor to the Central African Republic, followed by Gabon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, de m'avoir.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. I believe that when we talk about elephants, well, they have no borders. They don't have passports to cross from one country to another. So we cannot talk about the elephants of Zimbabwe, of DRC, from South Africa, and so forth. I believe that in amending this appendix, we are going to be encouraging the ivory trade further, and that will have a negative impact on the survival of African elephants. We reject this proposal from Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you. Central African Republic. I give the floor to Gabon, followed by the United Republic of Tanzania.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Gabon opposes any proposal that would reopen ivory trade, because that will risk the increase in poaching in range states for elephants. In Annex 4 of Res Conf 9.24, Rev 17, it says that we must apply the precautionary principles. Elephants are transboundary and migratory species, as those who have spoken before me from the Central African Republic. The IUCN Red List estimates that the savanna elephant is in danger and that the forest elephant is also in critical danger. We must maintain and strengthen what we have in place. International trade has an impact on poaching in all range states for elephant. So a proposal such as this could harm strengthening the protection of elephants. So I would like to repeat, we strongly oppose this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabon. I give the floor to Tanzania, followed by the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania full support the proposal by Zimbabwe, and we strongly urge other parties to support the proposal as a reward to the conservation success demonstrated by Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania. I give the floor to the UK.
Thank you, Chair. As other parties have stated, this proposal would allow for the resumption of international commercial trade in elephant ivory. The UK remains of the view that any resumption of commercial trade in ivory risks stimulating demand, which would quickly outstrip supply, ultimately incentivising poaching and driving further declines in elephant populations. Whilst we recognise the significant cost involved in the conservation of elephants, we do not consider reopening the international ivory trade to be the appropriate solution. However, we do acknowledge the challenges of living alongside elephants, and we would urge range and non-range states to work together to find innovative solutions for sustainable nature financing, as was discussed earlier today in Committee 2. This is the only way we will balance effective elephant conservation with protecting livelihoods and supporting those communities that live alongside large wild animals. Chair, we are therefore not in a position to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, United Kingdom. I now give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Niger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We consider this proposal to be very, very dangerous to all elephants across Africa. International ivory markets are global in nature, and consumer markets do not distinguish between source countries or the level of protection and management capacity. Any type of commercial transaction involving ivory, or even the prospect of such transactions, wherever it comes from, stimulates demand and poaching, and gravely threatens all of our elephant populations. Therefore, Nigeria strongly opposes this proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Nigeria. I give the floor to Niger, followed by Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I do not want to take up too much time, but I would like to simply say that elephants have already suffered too much. The major issues that harmed it would be reopened. Once you open up a potential for the exploitation of specimens of this species, you open up major threats to the species. In the West African sub-region, there are many threats for the species. I don't need to list them all now, but I would just like to say that we oppose this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Niger. I give the floor now to Burundi, followed by Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. We firmly oppose this proposal, which risks opening up a process that will seriously harm elephant. Thank you.
Thank you, Burundi. I now give the floor to Togo, followed by Namibia.
Thank you, Chair. The concerns of countries such as Niger, Burkina Faso, Gabon are on exactly the same line as Togo believes. So we oppose this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. I now give the floor to Namibia, followed by Botswana.
Thank you, Chairperson. Briefly, Namibia would like to register her full support for Proposal 4 as introduced by Zimbabwe. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Namibia. I now give the floor to Botswana, followed by Lesotho.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor. Botswana supports the proposal and hopes other parties do likewise. As the country that holds the single largest population of elephants and has demonstrated what we can do with the investments coming out of elephants, we look for your support. Mr. Chair, the IUCN Red List that is being cited now, we all are aware that it is being challenged, and so we need to bear that in mind. We've also have absolutely no evidence that the once-off sales that have happened before led to any spikes in any of the proponents. And so, again, we trust that our systems we have in place are robust. Instead, Mr. Chair, the large number of elephants that our countries manage have led to significant loss, including of human lives, including 50 people that have been killed by elephants just in Botswana in the last decade. Botswana spends in excess of $5 million per annum to compensate for damage due to elephants, for which we have no other sources to replace. And so the proposal actually seeks to remove redundant text for the foreign states. Any further future trade would be subject to agreed precautionary measures. And in this light, we hope other parties would support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Botswana. I give the floor to Lesotho, followed by Eritrea.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me the floor. Lesotho is in support of the proposal as presented by the proponents. Chair, Lesotho takes note of the elephants' conservation efforts as put forward by the proponents. I submit, Chair. Thank you very much.
I give the floor to Eritrea, followed by Ethiopia.
Thank you, Chair. We oppose the proposal as it opens ivory trade once again, thereby threatening all elephant population worldwide, particularly endangering small elephant population found in some smaller states such as Eritrea. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eritrea. I give the floor now to Ethiopia as the final party on my list.
Thank you, Chair. Ethiopia recognizes the great effort made by the proponent parties to improve the conservation and the management of the elephant populations. However, Ethiopia has a concern that this proposal risks the reopening of illegal trade in ivory and undermines the decision made to close the domestic ivory market. Therefore, Ethiopia opposes this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethiopia. And before I come back to Zimbabwe for any reflections they might have, I regret that I wasn't able to give observers any input to the last proposal we discussed, but so I will open the floor for a couple of comments, perhaps, from observers, if there are any. Okay, I will give the floor to IUCN, then IAW, then IWMC, and I will close the list for observers there. Thank you, with your indulgence.
Thank you, Chair. The IUCN would like to respectfully correct the statement by Botswana that did not accurately reflect our work to assess the African savanna elephant on the IUCN Red List. Our published and reviewed assessment determined that the species is endangered, and when petitioned, it maintained the endangered category. So we just want to put that on record, that yes, there was a challenge, it was resolved, and the African savanna elephant is still maintained as endangered. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IUCN. So I'll now give the floor to IAW. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As this is the first occasion for IAW to take the floor, we'd like to congratulate the government and people of Panama for hosting this meeting and to congratulate you on your election to chairing this committee. Mr. Chairman, the way we read this, the African elephant populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe are not small, they do not have a restricted distribution, and they are not undergoing a marked decline. Put simply, they do not meet the biological criteria that this convention has adopted for including in Appendix II. Indeed, the proponents should be supported for their continued efforts to protect elephants, and in the face of NGO-led opposition, recognised for asserting their right to use their natural resources. In supporting this proposal, Mr. Chair, we would request Zimbabwe to elaborate how it will include satisfactory precautionary measures and clarify how any future trade in registered government-owned raw ivory would be conducted, regulated and enforced. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. IAW, I give the floor to IWMC.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like maybe to ask 3 questions. When will it be recognized by the Conference of the Parties that legal activities are not promoting illegal one, and to the contrary, prohibitions is a factor to encourage and develop illegal activities. Question number 2, when the Conference of the Parties will be able to recognize the value of sustainable use as a conservation mechanism, as it has so clearly demonstrated by the certain African countries. One final question, Mr. Chairman. When will it be possible for the Conference of the Parties to accept the fact that we should not punish the success stories of those who have been able to increase their populations of wild animals thanks to the cooperation of the people? So those are the questions I'd like to ask in front of this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, IWMC. So to sum up, we've had a fairly extensive debate. I've heard support for Zimbabwe's proposal. I've also heard significant opposition as well. So I would like to go back to Zimbabwe, offer you the floor, and ask for any reflections on what you prefer as the best way forward. So Zimbabwe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We appreciate the ongoing discussion, and also we appreciate all the divergent views that has been reflected in this COP committee. However, as Zimbabwe, we maintain our position and our proposal. At the same time, we wish to point out that our African savanna elephant is not endangered, as the IUCN Red List assessment was challenged, and I believe the results will be shared soon. However, we request that the annotation be cleaned to reflect all the changes that has been discussed in the previous COP and also as discussed today. However, we take note that as the annotation will be cleaned, it doesn't mean that the trade in ivory will be opened. And again, on age, we request that our proposal as Zimbabwe to remove for non-commercial purposes in relation to trade in leather goods for Zimbabwe is captured in E be considered. Thank you, Chair.
So Zimbabwe, we were just discussing and trying to clarify the intent of your proposal there. I'm trying to be sure that you maybe want to test, maybe by vote, your proposal as it stands, or are you looking to actually amend your current proposal to clean it, as you suggested, and maybe remove non-commercial purposes? So if you could be very specific about what you want to see, that would be helpful for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us this opportunity again. I think in our proposal, I think we have two things. Number one, we want the annotation to be cleaned. And we also want on E, because if you look at our own notation on E, it allows commercial, trade of leather goods in the other countries with the same annotation and listing. So we also want that to apply to Zimbabwe. And going back to the original, to our original submission, following the views that have been expressed in this committee, following the views that have been, it shows that there's no support for ivory trade whatsoever. And I think that can be resolved separately, but would appreciate the cleaning of the annotation and also having that addition for Zimbabwe on our leather annotation. I hope.
So I think we understand your point about paragraph E in the annotation about trade in leather goods. But I think you keep referring to cleaning the annotation, and I think you have to be very specific to say exactly what you want removed, what you consider to be cleaning, and so that all the parties here can understand, of course, me as chair and so on, what precisely you're proposing. And yes, so if you could just clarify that, Zimbabwe, please.
Thank you, Chair. When we say cleaning of the annotation, it's about removing the redundant text. So I'm trying to open my proposal now so that we can just work together. Okay. Chair, on E, we start from E. We trade in leather goods for commercial or non-commercial purposes for Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And we strike through from end to the end. That's E.
Thank you. We've
On
got that.
4, we strike through 4, we remove 4. We go to 7, we strike through 7 and edge. And 5 as well. We just strike through that, and on 6, it remains, 6 remains.
6 remains.
H, we also strike through H.
So in trying to follow, I think what you seem to be describing Zimbabwe is what's actually in your proposal as it stands. Is that, yeah, is it correct? Okay, right. We understand that. We thought you were perhaps looking to make some change. So can I be clear that you would like to resolve this, whether you would like to put it to a vote to determine the outcome?
Yes, we go for a vote.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Just so that we were clear. So we will now move to a voting procedure. If I find my bits of paper. If we can ensure that all delegates are seated and remain seated during the process. So, beginning the voting procedure, this is a vote for proposal number 4, submitted by Zimbabwe. This vote is a normal vote. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the EU. This is a vote to amend the appendices, and thus requires a 2/3 majority. If you vote yes, you're voting in favor of Zimbabwe's proposal, and if you vote no, clearly you're voting against it. So I'll just check that the technicians are set.
We are ready, Chair.
Thank you. So parties, you have 40 seconds to cast your vote, and the ballot is open now. Thank you, technicians. If you could display the results on the screen. So this proposal is not adopted and failed to reach the 2/3 majority. So I've actually remembered this time. Would the technicians display the individual party votes on the screen, please? Thank you. Technicians, I think everyone's had a chance to see their votes. So we will now move on to proposal number 5, which again deals with African elephant and proposes to transfer the populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe from Appendix II to Appendix I, proposed by Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, Mali and Senegal, and I invite one of the proponents to introduce the proposal. Burkina Faso, you have the floor.
Okay. Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair. It has been several conferences of the party that we have been requested that African elephants be fully protected from all trade. Today, the species meets all the criteria in Appendix I. Following the IUCN Red List evaluation of 2021, over the last 3 generations, the population of savanna elephants have been diminished by 60%. And the species is now considered in danger of extinction. When it comes to the forest elephant, they are also in critical danger, according to the newest IUCN evaluation. Chair, poaching, loss of habitat, and serious droughts that our continent experiences have devastating impact on the species. This is true for Burkina Faso and throughout the rest of Africa. According to the latest MIC analysis, poaching remains very intense in West African countries, Central African area, and in Southern Africa. In addition, seizures of ivory between up to 2019 show an intensification of poaching in the south. Chair, elephant are a very migratory species. They don't just remain in the territory of one country. 76% of the elephant live in trans-border areas, and they cover land in 2, sometimes up to 5 countries. So a split listing based on frontiers decided on by men, by humans, don't make sense. Elephants can move from an Appendix I country, and then by the end of the day, they can be in Appendix II country. That is why the biological criteria for the inclusion of all African elephants in Appendix I, as defined in Annex I of Resolution Conf 9.24 Rev 17, must be considered to have been met. Elephants are disappearing at an enormous speed. They can't put up with the increasing pressure of the continuation of trade. It is high time that we take the measures that are necessary to protect, finally, this emblematic species. Otherwise, our grandchildren will never see elephants except in storybooks or in documentaries or in zoos outside their range states. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Burkina Faso, for that introduction. I will now open the floor for parties. So I give the floor now to Benin, followed by Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair, for giving me once more the floor so that we can speak clearly on the needs of the conservation of African elephants. Benin supports the single listing of all elephants in Appendix I. Split listings of elephant populations do not make sense from a biological point of view. Elephants constantly move across borders and in many of the range states. So we can't put the physical barriers that humans have imposed on a species that is heavily threatened by poaching. This listing doesn't make sense on from a legal point of view, because it can lead to confusion and be unclear. At the last meeting of the Standing Committee in Lyon, we held calls for international regulations that stand for all elephants as a single regulation. So we call on all parties to support the listing of all elephant populations in a single appendix, Appendix I. Thank you.
Thank you, Benin. I now give the floor to Togo, followed by the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Togo also supports this proposal. According to the Mike and ETIS program reports, we continue to see losses, and we see an increase in poaching even in southern Africa. And this is of concern because it is the countries in the southern part of Africa that have the largest elephant population. The increase in poaching is therefore ever more dangerous. Recent studies have shown that the ivory trafficking networks are ever more organized in southern Africa, and it is probably very active and dangerous criminal networks. We have seen how to mitigate this situation. How we can allow the species to reestablish itself. We must have them listed in Appendix I. Thank you.
Thank you, Togo. Democratic Republic of the Congo, followed by Botswana.
Thank you, Chair, for giving us the floor. The Democratic Republic of Congo, which is the standing chair of the Development Community for Southern Africa, thinks that this is lacking in scientific data. We think that this listing will not bring us a solution to poaching. Just recently, we looked at the previous proposal where all those who spoke recognized the conservation efforts in southern African countries when it comes to elephant range states, and no one contested that. All those who spoke. So why transfer elephant populations from Appendix II to Appendix I? It's simply provocation. It is deviating from CITES objectives. We must look towards other conventions, such as the CBD. We must ensure at CITES that trade is legal, traceable, and sustainable. And when we look at elephants in southern Africa, by transferring them to Appendix I, we are punishing those countries. If we uplist them, my country will have to submit a reservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Democratic Republic of the Congo. I give the floor to Botswana, followed by Kenya.
Thank you for the floor. Botswana opposes this proposal that calls for inclusion of all populations of elephants in Appendix I through transfer from Appendix II to 1 of the populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. The justification advanced by the proponents of the proposal is that there's a marked decline in population size of the species in the wild. There is no truth in this. Chair, the proposal, the reasons are not valid because the population in Botswana and the Kaza-Kavango Transfrontier Conservation Area is not declining. This fact is acknowledged in the IUCN Red List that I referred to earlier. We hold over 250,000 elephants. Moreover, there is no significant decline in habitat of the species. Moreover, poaching is also declined in all of these countries as confirmed by MIC reports. Indeed, within the Chobe National Park, which is Botswana's MIC sites, there's only been 3 elephants poached in the last 2 years out of a population of over 70,000 elephants. So poaching is not a threat by any measure. These countries that Botswana, the 4 countries have put in place good measures and policies to address illegal offtake. Furthermore, the proponent advanced split listing as the reason for their proposition. Chair, we all know that although split listing is discouraged, the text of the convention does allow, and there are species that do appear in both appendices, so that split listing cannot be put forth as a reason. Chair, it is advisable for parties to put in place good measures and activities to address poaching instead of imposing more trade restrictions on countries that are conservation successes. Trade restrictions only exacerbate threats to species if conservation is devalued through removing incentives, which this proposal seeks to do. So Botswana calls for non-support of this proposal because the biological criteria as stipulated in Resolution 9.24 revised at CoP18 are not met, and we trust other parties will support us in this regard. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Botswana. And I'd said earlier we would continue till 6 p.m. It's nearly 6 now, but the interpreters have kindly given us more time, so hopefully we can perhaps conclude this proposal tonight with their indulgence. So I would ask everybody to keep their remarks as brief as possible. I now give the floor to Kenya, followed by Niger.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Kenya remains opposed to the split listing of the African elephants. Chair, as I mentioned earlier, Kenya has had 2 regimes in its elephant conservation agenda. There was a regime when trade was legal, the regime that ended in 1989. That regime saw Kenya's elephant population reduced from 167,000 to 16,000 in 1989, when Kenya and other countries petitioned the COP to list the African elephants on Appendix I. Mr. Chairman, for Kenya, and I think with many other states, this listing on Appendix I worked and created a breathing ground. We had a policy that enhanced law enforcement, lots of investment, and we reversed the poaching trend that could have seen Kenyan's population go to extinction, and more than doubled our population to the current number of 36,280, which happens to be the 4th largest savanna elephant population globally. Mr. Chairman, because we have done 2 experiments which resulted into the current split list, we saw spikes when the experiment was done in 1997. There was a spike in 1998. Second experiment was done in 2007. There was another spike that ran through 2008 to a peak in 2012. And we contribute this to the split listing of the elephants. Therefore, Chairman, we want to support this proposal put forward by Burkina Faso, Guinea, Mali, and Senegal to at least have elephants have a breather, and we focus on these other challenges of connectivity, human-elephant conflict, and also trying to continue, because some people still have appetite for ivory. We still continue to invest on the law enforcement. So we totally support this proposal to give, for the sake of conserving elephants in all its range, both in Africa and Asia. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. And just to remind you, we're in extra time now, if you like, and so please make your arguments and your points, whether for or against, as succinctly as you can. So I give the floor to Niger, followed by Senegal.
Merci bien, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, sir. We would like to congratulate the authors of this proposal, Proposal 5. Niger supports the authors of Proposal 5 and would ask other state parties to do so as well. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Niger. And for your brevity, I give the floor to Senegal, followed by Liberia.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, sir. We still have elephant populations decreasing almost throughout their range of states. In 1980, populations were estimated at 1.3 million. In 2015, there were just 415,428 elephants in Africa, so a loss of over 600,000 in a short period, a very steep decline, which is more than 50% required to have an species Appendix I listed. So the current situation, given the climate change, is having a very serious effect, and it would be very good to have just one Appendix I listing for this species. Thank you.
Thank you, Senegal. I give the floor to Liberia, followed by Panama.
Thank you, Chair. Liberia would first of all like to congratulate the authors of this proposal, and Liberia stand supportive of a position to oppose the split listing of all African elephants by the CITES Convention, and we highly support the proposal put forward by the authors of the particular proposal to be able to give room for sustainable conservation of this species and to be able to have all range states that have the species presence to be more monitored and regulated in terms of trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Liberia. I give the floor to Panama, followed by the European Union.
Gracias, presidente. Felicito a los proponentes. Una propuesta coherente basada en ciencia, en facilitar implementación y evitar problemas de trazabilidad.
One moment, Panama.
Apologies. You now will get English. The interpreter apologizes.
Panama, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
We would like to congratulate the proponents. We have a coherent, science-based proponent that is going to make implementation easy and make traceability possible. And this is based on work from the IUCN, which has a very clear set of evidence for us. And we need to ensure that there is no problem because the market is closed. If the market is open, then the market will rise because of higher demand. We have to ensure that we are dealing with ivory because you're dealing with dead elephants, but when it comes to elephants and human-elephant conflict, that's a problem. And if you're looking at just natural death, that won't help at all. We think this is a good proposal, and we invite parties to support it. Those populations in the range states will be able to benefit from tourism, people come and see these wonderful creatures. We want that rather than an ivory market that serves just a minority. Thank you.
Thank you, Panama. I now give the floor to the European Union, followed by Tanzania.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The EU and its member states continue to believe that the population of Loxodonta africana in Botswana, Namibia, South Africa and Zimbabwe do not meet the biological criteria for inclusion in Appendix I. It's also clear that those range states involved do not agree with this uplisting. Therefore, we do not support the uplisting of all African elephants in Appendix I. Thank you.
Thank you, European Union, and for your brevity, I give the floor to Tanzania, followed by South Africa.
Thank you, Chair. The United Republic of Tanzania strongly oppose the proposal by Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, Mali, and Senegal on transfer of population of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe from Appendix II to Appendix I of CITES. Since this population of Loxodonta africana of this country do not meet the biological criteria stipulated in Annex I of Resolution Conf 9.24 for their inclusion in Appendix I of CITES. And again, Chair, this proposal is a punishment to the conservation success story. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanzania. And now I give the floor to South Africa, followed by the Central African Republic.
Thank you, Chair. South Africa would like to reiterate what other SADC members states have already said. The species is not threatened in the range states where elephants are effectively managed and elephant products are legally traded and appropriately regulated. Elephant populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe do not meet the biological criteria for inclusion in Appendix I. The populations are stable to increasing and poaching impacts are negligible. Elephant populations have exceeded carrying capacity in some areas, and growing populations are resulting in management challenges already. This proposal, Chair, defies logic, and South Africa therefore rejects it in the strongest terms and calls on all other parties to do so. I thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I give the floor to the Central African Republic, followed by Eswatini.
Thank you, sir. The Central African Republic thinks that Proposal 5 amends or corrects Proposal 4, which has just been rejected by the committee. If we want to avoid trade in ivory and encourage the conservation of African elephants, all species must be Appendix I listed. That is why the Central African Republic supports Proposal 5. All African elephants must be Appendix I listed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Central African Republic. I give the floor to Eswatini, followed by Zimbabwe.
Thank you, Chair. As a range state, Eswatini finds this proposal flies in the face of recognizing and rewarding good, successful conservation. This proposal instead seeks to punish good conservation practices. Mr. Chair, if these kinds of provocative proposals are allowed to be submitted, it is only going to disincentivize conservation in our region. This type of long-reach proposal is in effect a challenge to other countries' sovereignties. Further, the biological criteria of this proposal do not meet or do not support the population being placed in Appendix II, let alone Appendix I. This proposal is simply illogical. The split listing has not promoted the decline in southern African countries of elephants. In fact, southern African countries have experienced increases in the elephant population since the split listings occurred. I would therefore advise the proponents and their supporters to concentrate on their own conservation measures for the benefit of their own elephants, instead of attempting to disrupt the successful conservation measures elsewhere. This proposal should be rejected for what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Eswatini. I now give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Zimbabwe feels that this proposal is mischievous and there's no grain of truth in it. What we are seeing here, Chair, is geopolitics, which has got nothing to do with conservation. Chair, the populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe account for most of the African elephant population. The elephant population in these parts of Africa is stable and increasing, though there is poaching in some parts. Through the CITES MIC program, it has been confirmed that pike is at its lowest. The elephant populations of these four countries do not meet the criteria for listing in Appendix I. There is no evidence that the populations of these four countries have declined. There is also no evidence provided to support the argument that the current split listing creates enforcement problems as stated in Burkina Faso, Equatorial Guinea, Mali, and Senegal proposals. The elephants of the four countries are amongst the most surveyed and studied on the continent, and there is no uncertainty as to the status of the populations. Chair, therefore, this proposal should be rejected outrightly. Thank you.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. I now give the floor to Japan, followed by Nigeria.
Thank you, Chair. Japan recognized that the status of the population in Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe does not meet the biological criteria for Appendix I listing. At CoP17, followed by CoP18, similar proposals were rejected, referring the data of estimated population and distribution area from the African elephant database. Also, Japan strongly recommends taking into consideration the opinions of range states in southern Africa. These countries have been exploring the way to make efforts for elephant conservation through sustainable use. In conclusion, Japan opposes to this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Japan. I now give the floor to Nigeria, followed by Rwanda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The protection of African elephant requires a global and single legal framework, sending a clear message that all trade in ivory or other elephant products is prohibited. The only way to achieve this is to list all populations of African elephants in Appendix I. So we therefore support the proposals by the proponent. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. I give the floor to Rwanda, followed by Zambia.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be precise. Rwanda does not find any merit in the proposal and finds these populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe with stable growth and not undergoing any marked decline, as well as they do not have a restricted range. Therefore, these populations do not meet the biological criteria for inclusion in Appendix I. Rwanda does not support the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rwanda. And now go to Zambia, followed by Namibia.
Thank you very much, Chair. Let us remember the criteria for Appendix I. Species which is freely available on the CITES website, and in the case we've forgotten. The arguments advanced by the proponents and their supporters is inaccurate and lacks the scientific rigor for an uplifting. The uplifting of the population from the 4 countries will not in any way address the challenges and conservation failures faced by the proponents. Clearly, the populations of the elephants in the 4 countries are not declining and thus do not meet the biological criteria set out by CITES, and therefore this proposal should not be supported. I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Zambia. I give the floor to Namibia, followed by the Congo.
Thank you, Chair, for the floor. Namibia does not support proposal number 5. The elephant population of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe do not meet the biological criteria nor the trade criteria for the inclusion in Appendix I. If adopted, this proposal will not add any value to the conservation of African elephants. Therefore, Chairperson, this proposal must be rejected right away. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Namibia. I give the floor to the Congo, followed by Israel.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, sir. I don't think that it's possible really to want one thing and its exact opposites. We cannot have double standards either. We need a one-speed CITES rather than a two-speed one. I think we all have to recognize that elephants attract a lot of criminal networks. We see the threats of very modern, sophisticated poaching using the latest weaponry. Because of all this, the Congo supports this proposal. It will enable us to fight the crime that this species attracts. It is a species threatened with extinction, and we have to recognize that. It is the truth throughout Africa. I think we have to face those facts. Thank you.
Thank you. The Congo, before I give the floor to Israel, I've still got quite a few parties to go, but I'm now going to close the list. But Israel, you have the floor, followed by the United States.
Thank you, Chairman. The text of our convention says taxa are to be listed on the appendices by species. Article 1 defines species precisely. Quote, any species, subspecies, or geographically separate populations thereof, end quote. The Southern African elephants do not comply with this definition. They do not meet the legal criteria for a separate listing. Therefore, Southern African elephants never were eligible for a separate or a split listing. Acceptance of this proposal would resolve this inconsistency. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Israel. I now go to the United States, followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. The United States does not support this proposal.
We did not support the last proposal either. We note that the outcome on Proposal 4 is the same as the outcome for similar proposals at the last several COPs. Future COPs are likely to arrive at the same outcome. Given the debate we're having now, we expect the same fate for this proposal as well. As a conference, we should not continue to do this. We understand the frustration of parties with large elephant populations. We also understand the fear of parties with small elephant populations. But it is clear that we are at a stalemate and must find a new way forward that rewards conservation efforts instead of penalizing them and unites rather than dividing. Earlier today, the chair of Committee 2 established a working group on COP19 Doc 66.2.2 to discuss establishing a fund accessible to African elephant range states upon non-commercial disposal of ivory stockpiles, shifting the conversation away from the ivory wars and towards sustainable funding for range states to address human-elephant conflict, conservation efforts, and community development is clearly necessary. The United States has resources we are willing to devote to this new approach, and we believe others do as well. We look forward to conversations with range states on the concept in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you. United States, and now go to Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. Indonesia sharing the same views with the Secretariat. Indonesia does not support the proposal for the reason that it does not meet the biological criteria for listing in Appendix I. Thank you.
Thank you, Indonesia. We now move to Eritrea, followed by Uganda.
Thank you, Chair. Data and information so far provided does not indicate that any of the 4 range states which are the subject of this proposal have underwent marked declines in their population in the wild. We understand that the elephant population in the 4 range states, namely Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zambia, is big. Furthermore, criteria A, B, or C in Annex 1 of resolution confers to 9.24 of COP7 do not seem to be met given the population of African elephants from these 4 range states. South African elephant range states should be encouraged on their conservation efforts they have demonstrated and not be punished. We thus oppose the proposal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Eritrea. And I'll give the floor to Uganda, followed by Malawi.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, Uganda would like to align itself to parties that have objected to this proposal. Chair, parties agreed on a clear listing criteria for different species, and it is very clear that the elephant population in the southern range is very healthy, growing, and safe. Chair, there is no doubt that the countries in question in the southern African range have demonstrated the capacity to effectively manage elephant populations over the years. In our view, Chair, we should be applauding these countries. We should be discussing a rewarding mechanism for countries that perform very well when it comes to conservation of the African elephant and other species. So in our view, we feel that adopting this proposal might be a disincentive for parties that attempt to protect their species and conserve them effectively. We therefore do not support the proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. And now give the floor to Malawi, then Burundi.
Thank you, Chair. Malawi is one of the
southern African states whose elephant populations, though small, is on a path to growth. And therefore, Malawi would like to align with the 4 southern African states who are rejecting this proposal to uplist their elephants to Appendix I. Therefore, we request for the rejection of this proposal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Malawi. I now give the floor to Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Burundi supports Proposal 5. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Burundi. I see, Benin, you have requested the floor, but from my notes, you've already spoken, and I don't think we have time really to give second opportunities. So what I would like to do before going back to the proponents on a way forward is to see if there are any observers who wish to make a comment on. So I'll give the floor to a couple of observers. I will invite Conservation Force and Foundation Franz Weber. Conservation Force, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And this is our first intervention, so warm congratulations for the way you are conducting this meeting. And we would like to intervene very briefly, Chairman, on the assessment of IUCN on the African savanna elephants. We had listened before to the remarks of Botswana and to the response of the IUCN African Elephant Specialist Group. That response, Chair, is not completely correct. There has been a ruling, and the ruling said verbatim that although the endangered listing was maintained, given that uncertainties, a range of categories, vulnerable, endangered is possible, being the vulnerable category also plausible. So for the sake of transparency and for the sake of giving a detailed and trustworthy range of information from IUCN, this is the right categorization of African savanna elephant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Conservation Force, and I'll give the floor to Foundation Franz Weber.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. This statement is on behalf of 14 organizations, and we will provide you with the names. The Franz Weber Foundation has been an observer since 1989, when all African elephants were listed in Appendix I. This historic decision led to the re-establishment of African elephant populations throughout the continent. However, since then, little by little, we have reduced the protection, and elephants have been decimated. 4 populations being put into Appendix II makes it seem that they are not really at risk, and it also means that ivory trade could be restored. Elephants suffer from poaching, the loss of their habitat, and also the effects of climate change. The Mike and ETIS programs show that poaching has increased even in southern Africa. The savanna elephants are considered to be at risk of extinction on the IUCN Red List, and forest elephants are in critical danger. To definitely protect this iconic species of the whole continent. We have to send out a clear message to all poachers, traffickers, and consumers that the international trade in ivory is completely banned and forever. We therefore strongly support the proposal to list all African elephants in Appendix I. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Fundación Franz Weber. In the interest of time, I'm not going to offer the floor to any further observers. Banan, you still have your button pressed, but you have spoken once already, and I did close the list, and we don't have time, with respect and with regret, to give people second interventions. So what I would like to do now is to sum up. Clearly from the debate, I've heard a range of support. I've also heard a range of opposition. There's clearly no consensus in the room, and perhaps this can only be resolved by a vote, but I will go back to give the proponents, at least one of the proponents, the opportunity to offer any final reflections before I decide the way forward. So if any of you would like to comment. Okay. So Burkina Faso, as a proponent, you have the floor. I would just like to hear not more arguments about the debate. We've had the debate. It's just how we go about how you, as a proponent, would like to resolve this absence of consensus. You have the floor.
Okay, merci.
Thank you, Chair. You have summarized our debate today so well. There is a division of opinions on the listing of African elephants in Appendix I, so I agree with you. We maintain our proposal, and we would like to submit it to a vote. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Burkina Faso, and clearly that is probably the only way to resolve these differences of views on the proposal. So I will begin the voting procedure in a few minutes. So, again, remind delegates to be seated and remain seated. This is a vote on Proposal 5, which is to include the populations of Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zimbabwe, the African elephant populations, I should say, from Appendix II to Appendix I. This is a normal vote. The delegation of the European Union will be voting. The vote of the European Union will be cast by the delegation of the European Union. It's a proposal for the amendment of the appendices, and it requires a 2/3 majority. So once the technicians give me the okay,
we are ready, Chair.
Thank you. So parties, as always, we have people walking in from the right-hand side. So please, delegates, take your seats. And right, everybody's seated. You now have 40 seconds to cast your vote. The ballot is open now. Thank you, technicians. If you could project the results onto the screen, please. Proposal number 5 is not adopted, having failed to reach the 2/3 majority. I now ask the technicians to display the results on the screen. Thank you, technicians. I think that's a full cycle. You can remove the results from the screen. It's now 20 to 7, so we've gone significantly over time, but of course we did have a big interruption in the middle of the afternoon. I'd like to thank the interpreters for their indulgence. We're very grateful for them, helped us make progress this afternoon. Before you go, a reminder, take your voting card with you, but don't take the headphones. So you leave the headphones here and take the voting card and not the other way around. In the meantime, have a very nice weekend, and we will see you bright and early on Monday morning. Good evening.